Well, let's now talk to Michael Gove, the Education Secretary, who, as we heard Boris Johnson did describe you as the J-cloth of the Cabinet. How do you feel about that?
J-cloths are very useful, provided I'm useful, then I'm happy.
What do you make of the Boris mania? Now, you've had your turn.
They can be beautiful in the right hands, yes.
What do you make of the kind of fervour that does seem to surround Boris Johnson? Even our little conference studio is surrounded by people. Is it likely to overshadow the Prime Minister?
No, I don't think it'll overshadow the Prime Minister, but I'm lucky. I first met Boris when I was 18 and I arrived at university, and I've known him for more than 20 years. And the Conservative Party is lucky to have someone who's as intelligent, charismatic, passionate and determined as Boris. He's a brilliant Mayor of London. And one of the things that I think Boris is entirely entitled as the Mayor to speak up for London. He was elected on the basis that while he was a Conservative to his bootstraps, he was also someone who, when he felt that the city would benefit from having an independent voice, he'd be that independent voice.
And do you see him as a future Prime Minister?
There are lots of people who I'm fortunate enough to know who would be...
Why the spotlight on Michael? That's the real story.
No, there was...
The Gove campaign, which should be launched now.
Well, I'm very flattered.
Are you endorsing him?
I'm very flattered. I wouldn't endorse anyone. I think David Cameron's doing a brilliant job. I think there are lots of other folk, including in the Cabinet, who could easily be Prime Minister. I'm not one of them. I could not be Prime Minister. I'm not equipped to be Prime Minister. I don't want to be Prime Minister.
OK, well, you are Education Secretary.
Yes.
So let's move on and talk about that. And in particular, your plans to replace GCSEs with the English Baccalaureate. Do you think you're trying to introduce this too quickly? The reason I say that is the exam regulator, Ofqual, really thinks that there should be a delay, that people shouldn't sit it until 2017.
Well, I think it's right that we make sure we introduce these exams as quickly as possible in order to deal with the problem that we've inherited with a set of examinations which are discredited. This year we've had understandable heartache on the part of students because the nature of the GCSE exam, split into modules with a funny sort of coursework called controlled assessment, has meant that many people are irritated and distressed because of the way in which it's been marked. So we need to change it.
And I think, what about the timetable, though? It's not just Ofqual, is it? It's the chair of the Education Select Committee, Graham Stewart, said that you're risking a mess and you need to stop taking the urgency pills.
Well, every morning I wake up and I take as many urgency pills as I can because as far as I'm concerned, our education system simply isn't good enough. And all the time, whenever there are reforms being put forward, there are always people who say, car canny, go slow, be cautious. And even if they're well-intentioned, they end up being the objective allies of the vested interests who've presided over a failing education system for too long.
So you're going to persist with this timetable despite the warnings?
Well, I'm convinced that the timetable that we've got, which will mean that in 2015 students will start studying for these examinations, and in 2017 they will sit them for the first time, will be more than enough time. And people can prepare now for the sort of change that we're going to make. We're going to pilot these examinations with some schools, and a number have already expressed their enthusiasm for doing so. And I've also made clear that if people want to get a flavour of the style of examination that we'll be introducing, then the IGCSE, the International GCSE, which is available in England and taken by some of our highest performing schools, is very, very similar to the type of exam that we want to introduce.
Why do you think that, according to opinion polls at any rate, the public don't seem to have confidence in the job that you're doing as Education Secretary, even lower than other members of the Cabinet, 1 in 5?
I think because I'm changing stuff. I think that it's always going to be the case that if you're involved in reforms, then you will necessarily generate enemies, and those enemies will spend their time seeking to undermine your position. But I don't mind being unpopular because the policies that I'm putting forward are popular. So if you look at our intention to have a more traditional curriculum, that's backed by the majority of people in this country. Our proposals to reform the examination system, backed by an overwhelming majority. When people were asked which subjects do you think students should study, the subjects that we've been championing, including biology, physics, chemistry, modern and classical languages, history and geography, those were the subjects that people backed. So I'm delighted that the ideas that I'm putting forward command that support. As for myself, well, personal popularity, if you want personal popularity, appear on X Factor. Don't become a cabinet minister. Well,
let's not go into the controversy over the X Factor, but for a lot of your new policy on education, you did rely on the former schools minister, Nick Gibb,
yes,
who lost his job in the reshuffle.
Yes.
Were you sorry to see him go?
Yes.
Were you consulted over him going?
I talk to the Prime Minister about appointments in my department, but by definition, all of those conversations are and must be confidential, because you can't have delicate decisions being made about the future of government departments and the future of individuals within them, which are conducted, in a forum that means that people can speculate and people can probe and pick over these matters.
It does seem to be a bit odd that you ended up, I think, with a minister who had actually wanted to resign, Lord Hill.
Jonathan Hill is a fantastic chap. I don't think it's the case that Jonathan wanted to resign. I think it's the case that Jonathan wanted to make sure that in the future he'd be able to carry on doing the effective job that he had, and he has done an amazing job. We've had 77 free schools established in the last 13 months. We now have more than 2,000 academies. Jonathan Hill is the Minister for Academies and Free Schools. So if there's anyone in this government who deserves the heroes, laurels and garlands, it's Jonathan Hill.
Michael Gove, many thanks indeed for joining us.